Nods of assent. Yeah. Shakes of disagreement. Cool. All right, I haven't been with you guys the past couple weeks again, which is unfortunate. But what have you guys been studying? Anybody remember what we've been looking at the past couple weeks? I'm sorry, what? Jacob and Laban. Okay, cool. So Jacob and Laban. The past couple chapters, so today we're going to be in Genesis 31. The past couple chapters have been about Jacob and the first meeting of Laban, right? So Jacob meets Laban. What's happened? Can you sum up for me so far where we've been? Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So Jacob goes to find Laban, right? And on the way to find Laban, he finds his daughter first. He really likes his daughter Rachel. And so he goes to Laban, and Laban says, well, we're family, because remember, Laban is his uncle, right? And Laban says, work for me. And he says, sure, but I need something from you. And he said, okay. So then Laban says, I'll give you my daughter if you work for me for 7 years. I'll give you Rachel. But instead he gives him Leah, which is the firstborn, and then makes the excuse of, the way around here is that the firstborn gets married first. So just work another. It'll be fine, right? So he keeps changing Jacob's wages, in essence, what he's going to get paid for how much. Eventually, though, they get married, all of them. And all of them get married. And then each of the daughters has maids, right? And they all have sons. How many sons? 12 sons. Well, actually, they have 11 right now, right? They don't actually have Benjamin yet. But, does anybody remember any of the 12 sons? Just a good question. It's a good thing to try and scratch our minds about it. Go for it. If you can say anything, go for it. Gad and Asher. Naphtali. Reuben. Simeon. Levi. Yeah. I'm trying to remember the song. Does anybody know the song? The song for all of this? Okay. Well, I feel like on the spot now. It's fine. It goes Reuben and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan and Naphtali, Gad, also Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph and Benjamin. These are the sons of Jacob. Right? That's a good one to help you guys remember. So I think we got 8 of the 11, so that's pretty good. Good job. All right. All right, so chapter 31. Oh, actually, I forgot, because this is the other thing, right? So Jacob then marries both of Rachel and Leah's maids, right? They have children. And then we get up to this point, and Jacob wants to leave. Laban says, please stay. If you stay, I'll pay you whatever you want. And he says, all right, look, I basically own your flocks now anyways, because I've been taking care of them for the past 16 years, 14 years. And so if you just give me all the speckled and spotted lambs, then we'll call it even, right? And I'll work for you. I think he says for another 7 years. For a long time, suffice to say. So he works for another couple of years more. All right. So let's start out in chapter 31. That's where we're picking up. So far, there's been a lot of speckled lambs, right? And actually, there's been a lot of strong speckled lambs. When the flocks were very strong, they all were speckled, and when they were very weak, they were white, right? And so all of Laban's flocks have weakened, and all of the lambs that went to Jacob have increased, and they've become much stronger. We're going to start in chapter 31. I think we should just try and read the whole thing. I know it's a lot, so let's try and split it up and see if we can get some people. There's 55 verses, so if we could get 5 verses apiece, now that's 11 people, but I think we have 11 people in here, roughly, right? Maybe? I don't know. I'm bad at counting. Yeah, can't do that. So, all right, let's see. We can read 1 through 5. All right.
Now Jacob heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. And what belonged to our father has made all this wealth. Jacob saw the attitude of Laban, and behold, it was not friendly toward him as formerly. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to his flock in the field. And he said to them, I see your father's attitude, that is not friendly toward me as formerly, but the God of my father has been with me.
6 through 10.
You know that I have served your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me and changed my wages 10 times. God did not permit him to harm me. He said, spotted shall be your wages, then all the flock were spotted. And he said, the stripe shall be your wages, then all the flock were striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. Three seasons of the flock I lifted up my eyes, saw the dream of the gates, the goats that made it with the flock of striped, spotted and white.
Okay, 11 through 15.
The angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob. I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flocks are streaked, speckled or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us.
16 through 20. Next 5.
All will know that God has taken away from our father belongs to us and to our children. Now then, whatever God has said to you, you do. So Jacob arose and set his sons and his wives on camels, and drove away all the livestock, all his property that he gained, the livestock in his possession that he had acquired in Padan-aram. He goes away from Canaan to his father Isaac. Laban had gone to shear his sheep, and Rachel stole her father's household gods. And Jacob tricked Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him that he intended to flee.
Next 5. 21 through 25.
So Jacob took all his possessions with him and crossed the Euphrates River, to the hill country of Gilead. 3 days later, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So he gathered a group of his relatives and set out in hot pursuit. He caught up with Jacob 7 days later in the hill country of Gilead. But the previous night, God appeared to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream, and told him, I'm warning you, leave Jacob alone. Laban got caught up with Jacob as he was camped in the hill country of Gilead, and he set up his camp not far from Jacob's.
26 through 30.
And Laban said, Jacob, what have you done, that you tricked me and driven away my daughters like captives of the sword? Why didn't you flee secretly and trick me? Did not tell me so that I might have sent you away with mirth and songs and tambourine and lyre? And why did you not permit me to kiss my sons and my daughters farewell? Now you have done foolishly. It is in my power to do you harm, but God of our fathers spoke to me last night, saying, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.
One more verse.
And now you have gone away because you longed greatly for your father's house. But why did you steal my gods?
31 through 35.
Jacob answered Laban, I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. If you find anyone who has your gods, you shall not then, in the presence of our relatives, seek for yourself whether there is anything of yours here. And if so, take it. Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the two maidservants. He found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he went to Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle. He was sitting on it. Laban searched through everything in the tent and found nothing. Rachel said to her father, don't be angry, my lord, but I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having a period. So he searched but could not find the household gods.
36 through 40. You read it? I can already read like 10 verses.
Jacob was angry and took Laban to task. What is my crime? He asked Laban. How have you wronged you? How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine. Let them judge between the two of us. I have been with you for 20 years. Your sheep, your goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts, but bore the loss myself. You demand payment from me for whatever was stolen by the day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night. Sleep. The sheep fled from my eyes. It was like this for 20 years. I was in your household and worked for you 14 years for your two daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times.
All right. Unless the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely now you would have sent me away empty handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked you last night. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. But what can I do this day to these my daughters, or to their children whom they have borne? Now therefore come, let us make a covenant, you and I, and let it be a witness between you and me. So Jacob took a stone and set it up as a pillar. Then Jacob said to his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there on the heap. Laban called it Jagar Sahudatha, but Jacob called it Gilead. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me this day. Therefore its name was called Gilead. Also Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another. If you afflict my daughters, or if you take other wives besides my daughters, although no man is with us, see, God is witness between you and me. Then Laban said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar, which I have placed between you and me. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not pass beyond this heap to you, and you will not pass beyond this heap for this pillar to me for harm. For God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, and the God of their father, judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered a sacrifice on the mountain and called his brethren to eat bread. And they ate bread and stayed all night on the mountain. And early in the morning Laban arose and kissed his sons and daughters and blessed them. Then Laban departed and returned to his place. Thank you guys for reading, as many of you did. I appreciate it. It's always good. We're all studying together, so nobody's going to judge or anything. You make a couple mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, so no worries. All right. So does anything in particular jump out to anybody in these passages that they want to talk about first? I know there was a lot there, so it's kind of a lot to cover.
Stolen gods.
The stolen gods, yeah. What about that in particular is interesting?
Why was she taken?
Yeah, yeah. Well, why did Laban have them in the first place, right? Because doesn't Laban even recognize? He says, oh, well, since you've been here, right, your God has, like, blessed me a whole lot, so it's great. You should stay here. In fact, back in chapter 30, if you turn back, Yep. 30 verse 27. And Laban said to him, please stay, if I have found favor in your eyes, for I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Right? Then he's like, just name your price. So clearly, Laban has learned to respect, or at least value, the favor of God, right? So why have other household God? Could be stubbornness, tradition, right? It's kind of just what's been there before. Yeah.
Seems like some at that time wanted to cover all the bases.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really great point. So it is kind of this idea of, well, sure, this God has blessed my flocks and the rest of my life, but, what if I need rain someday and he doesn't give it to me, Surely there's other gods out there. And that was part of the reason. So this is an interesting point, right? God says to Israel later on, he says, you'll have no other gods before me, right? In essence, like, don't have other gods. I am, and then he'll actually talk while they're in war, and he'll say, I am greater than their gods, right? All these things. But their gods don't exist, right? So why does God say that? I know this is kind of off topic a little bit, but it all relates, I promise. This is something that really kind of stumped me for a while. I was confused as to why God even seems to recognize other gods, right? Or say that he's stronger than them, or that they have done poorly, right, for their people, as opposed to what God has done for his people, right? Does anybody have any thoughts as to why that might be?
Why would you recognize other gods if there is no such God?
Right, exactly.
It's kind of a favor.
Right.
We call favor, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like, why would he recognize other than maybe to appease his people?
Yeah, to appease the people. That's definitely, that's getting there. That's pretty close to what, I won't want to say also that this is the final answer, but it is an answer, one that I got relatively recently. So the answer that has kind of come up to me through my studies has been, in essence, what God is doing is, God is kind of meeting them halfway, where he's like, look, there aren't any other gods, but the only way you're going to listen to me is if I tell you I'm stronger than them, right? Because they already have it stuck in their head. Like you said, the stubbornness, right? This kind of traditional, the traditional gods, right? They're like, oh, these are real. And so God just saying they're not is a little bit difficult to swallow sometimes for the Israelites. So he just says, look, I am stronger, I am better, I am the best, right, around, right? And so he's like, I am the greatest God, and therefore you should follow me instead of that.
It's like a starting point. This
Yeah.
is where you're at, but this is where I'm meeting.
Right, exactly.
The same stuff,
Right, right,
so they can see progress, that starting point.
right, exactly. So this is kind of the jump off point for God, where he's starting off with this. And does that mean that God lies to them when he says that?
No, it's in there.
You know, God tells us later on, thou shalt have no gods before me. It's what you put your value in.
Yeah.
When they call them gods, but it's what they are putting their faith in. And he's telling them, don't have faith in what you think you have faith in.
Right.
Because they can do nothing.
Right, right.
I am the only one who can provide for you. But it is what they are putting their faith in, and they're calling them God. So he's telling what you have faith in is not nothing.
Right, right. So, to sum up, God is trying to direct them where to place their faith, right? And recognizing that the things that they're placing their faith in aren't gods in the sense that God is God, right? They are still things that they place faith in. And so he's not invalidating that as much as he's encouraging them to change their perspective. Okay, all right. So, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, anybody got anything particular they want to say extra about that? Okay, so it could be that Rachel is kind of doing the same thing that Laban's doing, right? Which is this kind of idea of, oh, this is all we've ever had or all we've ever known. And if you, actually, this is something interesting that I want to point out anyways. In verse 47, chapter 31, Laban calls it Jagar Sahadutha, whatever. And Jacob calls it Gilead. Does anybody have any footnotes about those two words? Or two names, I suppose?
Salah is, means witnessing in Aramaic. The Hebrew, is witnessing.
Yeah, so it's the exact same name.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's in Aramaic.
Right, exactly. Which is to point out that Laban, again, just to re-emphasize, is not a Hebrew, right? He's not of the same perspective, and he doesn't, as a traditional sense, worship the God of Israel, right? The God of Isaac. And so it's just interesting that they name it in different languages, because again, Laban is, I believe, Syrian, is what it says. Yes. All right. So yeah, so does that answer that question pretty well, you think?
One of the things with Rachel that I find is that she's greedy.
Yeah.
Did you notice when he called them to the field, their question was, do we have no inheritance left from our father? Is there nothing else coming to us from our father? Then she's the one that takes the idols, which will probably make gold. So
Yeah.
I don't know that she's taking them for God, but it's for the gold.
Yeah.
She wants to secure, and later on with her own son and the mandrakes, she sells the mandrakes. She wants something out of it. She is very greedier. She's not going to give up anything for nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a good point too. So they could have been made of very valuable substances, right? And that's that could have been it too. And well, at least exotically made, if not perhaps out of gold. They could have been made out of wood or something like that. But they could have been specially farmed. Those kind. Yeah, they have some sort of value for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and that section that you're talking about is in verse 14 and 15, and I find it interesting too that there's this interesting argument between them all, and they're not even talking to each other when they have it, right? Because Rachel and Leah in verse 14 and 15 are like, yeah, everything that was our father's is really ours, so we can do whatever we want, is really, in essence, right? If you read verse 14 and 15, Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? In essence, we've taken it all, right? There's nothing left that he has for us, so we have all of it anyways. Are we not considered strangers by him? For he sold us and also completely consumed our money, right? He's like, yeah, whatever he has, we're giving him, and he's totally wasted all of it. For all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's, Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it. Right? And then Laban, later on, in verse 43, and Laban answered and said to Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and this flock is my flock. All that you see is mine. Well, what can I do this day to these my daughters, or to their children whom they have born? Right? So there's this interesting kind of back and forth throughout the whole chapter, which is, whose is it? Right? Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, you're right. Rachel thinks a lot like her father. There's a lot of, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree in these couple chapters. Okay. Anybody have any other questions in particular about that? Did you guys talk about the speckled, or the, I'm sorry, not the speckled. Did you guys talk about the rods that Jacob cut in the last chapter? Okay, what did you guys think about that? Because I wanted to hear what you said.
I think it was Jason, but it was like, there's a belief that they had then that these rods would change the outcome of the offspring.
Yeah. Right, because in essence what he did is he went and he stripped little spots out of it so that it was like a spotted rod, right? So the white showed underneath and then the darkened it, so it was like spotted the whole way over, right? Something that is kind of interesting along the lines of, whose flocks are these? Something along those lines that I had seen before when I was reading some of the commentaries for this. It says, verse 8, Jacob's talking. He says, if he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages, and all the flocks were speckled. And if he said thus, the street shall be your wages, then all the flocks were street. So God has taken away the livestock of your father and given it to me. Right? A lot of people think that this is showing that really what really what Jacob was doing was actually asked for by God. So kind of along the same lines as everybody remember the snake in the wilderness? They all got bitten by snakes, and God said, go make a rod and set it up. Kind of along the same line where he's like, we'll go make speckled rods and go set them up when they're having children, and all of the lambs will be speckled. Which is kind of interesting. All right. Yeah, I think we touched on a lot of this. I think this is a really interesting story, particularly just because it shows kind of the trajectory of Israel. Like it continues. This is the same kind of story that happens throughout all of the Old Testament, right? They are in a time of struggle or bondage, right? Kind of like when people are away in Egypt or when they're in the diaspora, right? And they kind of talk to God, and God says, look, I'm going to bring you back. I'm going to bring you back home, or I'm going to lead you out of this country. And then there's this little remnant, something happens, right? Somebody takes idols, or they start like, well, I guess we can leave those high places that we made. They're okay, right? Only a few of them, as long as we use them to worship God. And then about however long down, it turns away, and they turn away from God. So this is just an interesting story to me, just because it parallels a lot of Israel's struggle throughout history, right? All up until the time of Jesus. I don't know if anybody else was thinking that as we're looking at that, but that's one of the really neat things about the stories as we're going through these chapters with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Which is a lot of their lives parallel in a lot of ways the story of Israel, the nation, as it goes throughout history up until the time of Jesus. Yeah. All right, well, does anybody have any more questions? It's a little early, but I don't have much more to say about this, frankly. Like, it seems kind of a straightforward story to me. So if anybody else has any questions, we'll talk about them. Be free to talk about them. Yeah?
So they're all very superstitious, right?
Right.
Or you might say pagan, of pagan thinking. They have household gods. And even Jacob, who
He thinks if I put striped rods, that you can get a certain kind of animal from it, which is clearly ridiculous.
Right.
We understand if you, they didn't know genetics like we.
Right.
But here in this chapter, God reveals to him in a dream that I'm the one that gave you the wealth.
Right.
He said, saw in a dream that the ones that were mating were actually striped, speckled, and spotted, even though they may have appeared in reality to be other colors. God, the way of God saying, I'm doing this. It's not because you put these magic rods up in front of the line windows. This is how you're getting laid as well. There's just another emphasis that God is working through this, even though they're all confused about what's going on, and they're sort of mixed up on their gods and so forth.
Yeah.
He does give insight that the reason the flocks turned out the way they did is because of what I did, not because of what you did.
Right. Well, and that's, so to make that a little bit, my point a little bit more clear, you're right. That's a really good point. I actually, so the verse 10 there, where he says they were streaked, speckled, and spotted, right? I actually didn't pick up on that before. I had thought that it meant a multitude of sheep being streaked, speckled, and gray spotted. But no, I actually think you're right. It's probably that he's saying, look, they're all of them, right? They're all streaked, they're all speckled, they're all gray spotted. It doesn't matter.
God knew genetics.
Right.
They did.
Right, they didn't have any clue. Yeah, but, and so that's kind of also along those lines what I was trying to say a little earlier, where I was saying, the argument throughout these passages of, well, it's really our flocks. Well, it's really our gold. It's really our sons and daughters and stuff. It's really God's flocks, right? And that's what he evidenced when he says, like, look, I've given you stuff, right? God is saying, I'm the one who's provided for you. You haven't done anything. The rods haven't done anything. The fact that you married maids didn't really matter because I would give you children anyways. They're my children. They're my sheep. They're my gold, riches, those kinds of things, right? And it's interesting that God doesn't really say that so much, in so many words, I will say, throughout this passage in particular. He does, but not right here. But we have this argument between Rachel, Leah, Jacob, and Laban about it. And it is, if you look, you read between the lines, that's what God's saying is, in reality, they're my flocks, right? Just thought that was interesting. Yeah, but yes, thank you. The sheep being gray, or streaked, speckled, and spotted, right, are all the evidence that God is saying, look, it's me, right? Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? We're getting close to time. So. Observations, concerns, frustrations.
I was always under the impression that Jacob was 7 years and married Leah unknown. And then he had to work another 7 years before he married Rachel. But if you read it, after the wedding of the week with Leah, he gives him Rachel and he then stays another 7 years before he married her. So he didn't have to wait for the other 7 years to get Rachel. He had this extended, which shows that he gave his word that he would do it. He stayed. Why don't we just stay and
Yeah, it shows the quality of Jacob's word, right? Which is in essence that, look, I said I'd stay in 7 years. And I did, especially after he got his payment in advance. Yeah, that's interesting. I guess that was always my impression also.
So too, but the more you read that,
Yeah.
and
Chapter 29, verse 21 through 25.
well, no, yeah, 29 through 30, it sounds like even then.
Yeah. Oh, are you talking about the, right, right.
I guess I always just thought you would do
Yeah. Well, that's what I was, so chapter 29, verse 20, so Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed only a few days for him. Oh, you're right, so this was Leah. Only a few days to him because of the love he had for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. So they do all this, and then in, verse 26, that's where it is. Must not be done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give you this one also for the service which you will serve with me still another 7 years. Then Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, so he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife also. And Laban gave Bilhah to his daughter Rachel's maid. Yeah.
As you look at the life of Jacob and as he served under Laban, there's a great lesson there. And the lesson that I see is that Jacob did the best that he could in everything that he did. There were days he probably wasn't a happy camper about what he did, but he did the best he could. He knew that when everything was done and said, it is done. He has done the best that he could, even though it may not have been the ideal situation. He was blessed by God. And the lesson, I believe, there is that in anything that man does, regardless of what we do or who we work for, that we need to give our best. And because we're serving God and not necessarily serving something or someone else. Right. So I think that there is a lesson there that we need to look at Jacob and just see how he served under Luke.
Yeah, how he endured. Yeah, I agree. I think Jacob has a lot of long suffering, for sure. All right. Well, thank you guys for your comments and your questions and reading. I really appreciate this long passage.
Besides, you did it.
I know, I was a culprit.
Oh, you do? You're hanging there. My wife is out last year, so I got friends,
Now you can do it.
good God.
Keeps your face warm.
I don't want to mouth, but it's in your mouth. It's already you got to have a birthday, and anniversary. Three cakes.
Not 2 cakes. No, you kind of get
Married 42 years. 42, yeah. Another couple of weeks.
I never can remember. I always have to ask him.
compared to 1980.
I was surprised. You know, what called
That helps to know what kind typically they don't.